Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to True Crime with the Sarge. I am your host, Joseph Giacalone. Thank you for joining me on this Saturday afternoon. Welcome to the subscribers, the mods, and everybody else that has helped make this show successful. I really appreciate that. Just a couple of show notes. Tomorrow, I have a special show now booked with Cheryl McCollum. We're going to be dissecting the alibi of Brian Kohberger and what it could mean for the case. So that's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Monday morning at 8:30, we're going to have roll call. I know it's usually at 8 o'clock, but because I'm going to be on Court TV in the morning at 8, from 8 to 8:15, we pushed it up a little bit. And on Tuesday, I have retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Mark Safarik, who was part of the Behavioral Analysis Unit. So I got some great shows all lined up for you guys. Without any further ado, I want to bring in the guest that we have today, Josh Zeman. Josh is the writer, producer, and director of The Killing Season, which was a documentary from talking about the Gilgo serial killings and also other cases throughout the country. And his new documentary called The Checkpoint Zoo has been included in the 2024 Film Festival in Tribeca, and it's about the rescue of 5,000 animals from the wildlife park behind enemy lines in the Ukraine-Russian war. Josh, thanks for coming back on. Good to see you, pal.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you too.
So, as usual, when we prepare for these shows, we kind of wait to the last minute because you never know what's going to happen. And quite frankly, you couldn't have asked for better timing. Now, I mean, the initial appearance by Rex Heuermann was pretty much a nothing burger. He went in, it was only there a couple of minutes, and he was out the door. The defense got some data dump, which we're going to talk about for sure. But then afterwards, the fireworks began. And this is, I always tell people, if you want to see my shocked face, here it is. Because, wow, here we go. So what was your first when you heard it? I know you weren't shocked either, but.
No, I mean, well, what's interesting, and we can tell everybody that you and I spoke right before that, and we both hit on the exact same thing, right? I'm looking in my notes because I want to see it. Because the one thing I wrote down from the coverage was 422. I wrote down that number, 422. And you did the same thing, right?
Yep.
So 422 electronic devices. So let's get into what does that truly mean? And you mentioned, weirdly enough, Palm Pilots and stuff like that, which I thought was kind of funny. But who has 422 electronic devices lying around? What are they? Are they computers? Are they thumb drives? Are they drives? And so that just says to me that this is the trophies, right?
Yep.
The pictures, unfortunately and tragically, and this is where his collection may be. So that was something that I hit on, and you did too. The other thing maybe is that this trial is going to be extended for quite a long time. We're not gonna get a trial for quite some time. But the thing that we both hit on, I think, was Michael Brown, who is the defense attorney, basically asking for everything relating to Burke, the FBI files, et cetera, et cetera. And so what does that mean?
Yeah, and listen, I don't think anything with the Burke thing is good for the case. That's for sure. We're going to get into that today.
Yeah.
But since you brought up the 422, because everybody's putting in there 422 with the question marks and exclamation points. So apparently, some have not heard about this. So let's start off about the evidence and the implications and what you and I have spoken about and think that these things are, right? So listen. I'll get a new phone every couple of years. I hand my phone in. I don't keep it. Yeah. Or if I had an old computer and I buy a new one, I trade it in. Even if they give you $50 for it, to me, it's valueless at a certain point, right? It's just, and if you think about cell phone technology, right? I mean, compared to what we had in 2003, compared to what we have now, right? Why bother keeping these things?
It's crazy. Yeah. So. Yeah, well, why bother keeping them unless there's stuff on them that you don't want people to see, or if you're saving them? I mean, I tried to go through and think about it, and I made a lot of movies and have a lot of photos and videos that we store, and I don't have 422 electronic devices. I've got a drawer full of drives, but I don't know. That's just so interesting, and just means that there's must be a lot of stuff on there that could link him further to the case, I think, obviously.
Right. So how many films now, how many documentaries have you had now in the public domain? How many are really out there?
Like five or six: Murder Mountain, Sons of Sam, Cropsey, Loneliest Whale, 5 or 6, I think.
Okay. And so you have 5 or 6 documentaries that are out there in the public, and you're telling me you don't have 422 electronic devices of material left over from that, right? So this is and the devices, you said Palm Pilots, right? So remember those PDAs, right? I think they were called back then. They became very popular, right, with the little stylus, right? And these things could be considered, right, too. Like this is a thumb drive that I keep with me.
Yeah.
This has all my school information on it, right? So I've been teaching for 19 years. This is like the original one I've had for 19 years, is because of all my life is on it with school. And I have a backup of this, right? So if you want to include this, I have this. I got a backup. So the issue that comes down to is, I mean, could it be hundreds of these things? Maybe it could be hard drives, right? I mean, they don't really specify what other electronic devices they have, but everything's backed up on the cloud for me now. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, but the most disturbing thing was, I think, the chickens are coming home to roost, basically, which means we are now seeing the defense attorney's strategy for trying to deflect off of Rex Heuermann and to say that Burke, James Burke, former disgraced police chief, and or others may be either the real killer or he may have had help. And I think that is, for me, when I saw that, I was like, oh no, this is, look, and this better than anybody, so you tell me, but there is a ton of evidence, forensic evidence, DNA, Google searches, all that stuff that say that Rex Heuermann is the guy, right? But a jury has to look at the collection of evidence, and it's about reasonable doubt. It's about whether the defense attorney can introduce reasonable doubt. And everybody's saying that Burke is the killer and kind of throwing, kind of just almost movie-esque, ideas out that he's the killer and it's a whole big conspiracy. I don't even know if people thought what a detriment that would happen, in the case, in terms of, could that get Rex Heuermann off because it introduces a level of reasonable doubt?
Well, specifically and we're going to get into this, specifically Gilbert family attorney John Ray, who had his symposium in January, dropped another bombshell in regards to just that. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But yes, I mean, anytime you put the decision in the hands of a jury, you never know what you're going to get. There's no such thing as a slam dunk case, right? Yes, to me, the forensic evidence is absolutely mind-boggling against this man, and I'm sure it's plenty to convict him. But we've talked about this offline a bunch of times, right? About how the true crime world, it could help muddy the waters a little bit too. And when you start announcing James Burke as the this Long Island serial killer and putting out the evidence, quote unquote, and the pathway, because remember, people they haven't chosen. We're nowhere near picking a jury.
Yeah.
Good luck trying to find somebody on Long Island who's never heard about this, right? Or never heard about James Burke. I think even my mom, she's 88, and she's asked me, like, what's wrong with this guy, right? So. And I'm like, well, how much time you got, Mom? Right? So the issue that comes down to is that it has been devastating to the potential jury pool, and you probably agree with that one, right?
Yeah. Look, without a doubt, James Burke did some horrific and horrible things. Most importantly, disrespecting the victims themselves, the families, by obstructing justice in this case, by not giving the victims the idea of closure, which could have happened years and years sooner. But it's dangerous to say, is he the serial killer? Because, the defense attorney, they're like watching all these podcasts and everything like that to like look for, chinks in the armor, if you will, of the case. And the more that they can bring in about Burke and, weird claims that he's the killer for this and that, the more you're going to introduce doubt. Again, it's reasonable doubt. Is there reasonable doubt to believe that either Rex is the killer or the only killer involved? And that goes to me too. We looked at the case and we said that there were maybe one serial killer, maybe two. So we're in some ways just as kind of guilty as that. But, I was always very concerned about saying whether Burke was the killer, just because it seemed a little bit, to go, it was beyond the pale, if you will, to go like, is he the killer? Did he, aid and abet in some respects? Yes, but that's my fear. My fear is that now we've introduced reasonable doubt, and that's unfortunate.
Right. I mean, listen, I don't think there's any argument that he has deviant behavior. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's been documented. His police record has shown it. The internal affairs investigations, when his consorting with known prostitutes and everything. I mean, listen, there is no doubt about it that he has been involved in deviant behavior, including his last arrest in Bald Hill, right? Or what they refer to as Pickle Park. The issue that comes down to is there is a mountain of evidence to be able to help Michael Brown in his quest to create that reasonable doubt, and that's something that is a big concern because the evidence is on that end too is overwhelming.
Yeah, and it just shows the responsibility I think that we all have to have in terms of talking about the case and reporting on the case and trying to put out information. It seems to me that there's people who are just trying to stay relevant, and sure, we're all guilty of that. But I think it comes with some responsibility. I think I told you offline, I was like, okay, let's play the game. Let's play the game.
Okay.
Is Burke the serial killer? Why or why not?
Right. Well, I don't think Burke is the serial killer. He has created so many enemies in the Suffolk County Police Department that if anybody, even those closest to him, which we already saw a turn on him in a federal investigation, I think would have turned on him by now, even if it was anonymously. And that's my number one thing about why I don't think he's involved in any of that stuff. Because listen, we've seen him as a low-level criminal when he was a kid, right? That's been documented too. And we've also seen him with the penchant for hanging out with and consorting with other known criminals and sex workers and everybody else. But even they have a lot to lose if they don't come forward, right? If some of these people, and we've already seen a number of these people have come forward. So I think that he has a long list of enemies that would be willing to do him at any second.
Yeah. Well, or just like when we talk about, the whole scenario, like he doesn't have to. Why doesn't he have to? Because he's the police chief, meaning like he could get his rocks off or whatever power trip he's getting. He can get off by just, being the police chief and having the parties and everything like that. Like he doesn't have to go to the depths and the extremes that Rex does.
Right.
Rex was, a huge lumbering ogre of a man who was bullied when he was a child, and obviously had some weird relationships with his family members. You'll be nothing. That's unfortunately where this kind of serial killer behavior comes from, typically not from like the police chief, big swinging guy, doing this and doing that. So I think we have to separate them and understand what kind of mental state we're dealing with. It is all about power, right? It's about control and power. But the thing with Burke is he had the control and the power because he was the police chief. He liked to party, he liked to do drugs, he'd like to have parties where sex workers came, I think the question really is whether or not, and this is something that's been always in my mind, whether or not any of these victims were ever at these quote unquote parties that were had.
Well, and that's part of one of the allegations that John Ray took about. You want to get into that now, or do you want to?
No, we can hold that. Let's hold that.
Okay, let's hold that off. Yeah, because that's a big one, right? Because that affidavit is absolutely the thing that's pushing this thing forward. And when you saw the presser, it almost as if I got the impression that the district attorney Ray Tierney wasn't too happy about having to hand over these files now for James Burke, because technically that's not part of the investigation into the Long Island serial killer. So when you watch his facial expressions and you watch his nonverbal body cues, I think that this was like I knew this was going to happen, but no, not now.
It unfortunately, again, this is the bad behavior of the Suffolk County PD is going to come back and haunt this case. It was tainted from the beginning because of Burke's bad behavior. It was tainted because he obstructed justice with regards to the FBI, etc. And unfortunately, it is going to muddy the waters. I feel bad for Ray Tierney because he's just trying to get a conviction here. But now, if Michael Brown was a good defense attorney, he would just basically unleash and unload all this information over and over again. Was Burke this? Was Burke that? Did Burke ask said person about snuff films? All like the old
said person.
Which we all know, right?
Yeah.
I've heard the snuff story film when I was making the series back in 2016. It's a tough one, and it's interesting, by the way, that you're going to have Mark Safrick on your show because
Yes.
Mark was the FBI profiler who we went to for the Gilgo case. We had been looking at a number of crimes, and I was like, Mark, can you please give me your assessment of this case? And he was like, oh, geez, this is a tough one, and I don't think he really had the time, but I was trying to convince him. I'm like, Mark, this is it. This is the case. You have to look at this. Is it one serial killer? Is it two? What's your professional opinion? And he couldn't give it because it takes, he doesn't want to do off the cuff opinions. He really wants to have a deep dive. But when you have him on your show, please bring up the fact of what he thinks.
Oh, well,
we brought this to him so long ago.
I will. Yeah. No, I've known Mark for many years. He and I have taught together in certain aspects throughout we've done a couple of cold case kind of things. So it's so he's willing to come on. He doesn't do many interviews.
Yeah,
he doesn't. And so I'm kind of excited about it. And he did me a special favor, kind of like when when you and I started getting together, you as a favor, right? I mean, it's just that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Sheila, thank you for becoming a member. Thank you very much. And Elf just gifted a membership to the channel too. Thank you very much. So when we're dealing with this now scenario, I think you kind of hit the nail just right on the head. I think this is the only thing that Michael Brown is going to be hammering home every chance he gets in front of a mic. And I think there will even be pressers that don't involve a court appearance, and he's just going to keep on, hammering this away because it's a strategy that defense uses, right? If you can't attack the evidence, right? So the forensic evidence, I think we all can agree, is I think insurmountable.
Yep.
So all he's got is to bring in this red herring and play this card. And unfortunately, there is a lot of information for him to work with.
Yeah. And on top of it, I think there's a lot of not just information, but mysteries, meaning the other victims, whom we don't know. If you don't know the answers to those cases, who did those, then it introduces more doubt, as to who did this and all that other stuff. So I think, unfortunately, it's not just Burke's behavior, but it's the lack of answers with the other victims.
Exactly. And maybe this is a cue reason why that we've kind of saw Ray Tierney kind of sit back off and basically saying we're dealing with these four only, which you and I have talked offline. We're very upset about that.
Yeah.
But now maybe this is making sense.
Well, okay. And we should also talk about, because I think, it was a lesson for me to learn early in the game of the true crime world, which is just because we all may know who the killer is, the question is whether it's prosecutable, whether a DA is going to bring that evidence, however big and however small, because there's just not a lot of forensic evidence, right? If we live in a quote unquote CSI world, right? i.e., for juries, if we don't have scientific evidence, it becomes very hard to convict. So for these other victims, or for many other cases, if you don't have the proper evidence, a DA is not going to bring this to trial. Why? Because he doesn't want to lose. Now you may be like, well, what's, isn't it worth a shot? And it's like, no, it's politics. And we all know if it's anywhere in the United States where the police and politics mix, it's Long Island. So I understand he's very hesitant to bring anything up for other victims or any case that he cannot 100% win. I mean, can you imagine if he loses this case? I mean, it would be bonkers. Could it happen? Yeah.
Anything's possible. Yeah.
Anything.
Maria, I wanted to thank Maria Torres for the super sticker, and I also wanted to thank Forrest Nelson, who just donated 5 memberships to the channel. Thank you very much, Forrest. I really appreciate that. Yes. So, listen, like I said earlier, nothing's a slam dunk, right? I mean, just because you have all this evidence, we've seen other cases like OJ, where there was a ton of evidence and things just went bonkers, right? I mean, and the only good thing that we have about this is that nothing is going to be recorded in the courtroom, where people can now tweet about every sentence that was done. But what's going to happen is I tell everybody who they're very upset over the fact that New York doesn't televise these things. But I try to explain to them, don't worry about it, because after every day there's going to be another 2 hours worth of press conferences from both the district attorney and the defense attorney, just to tell everybody what happened.
So it's very interesting. When we did Cropsey, right, many years ago, it was about a court case in Staten Island of a guy. There in 1987, there had been a very short window of test, a pilot program sponsored by New York State, where they did allow still cameras in the courtroom. And so when we went back to do Cropsey in 2009, because Andre Rand had been convicted in a previous case and there were cameras in the courtroom, there was precedent to have cameras in the courtroom again. And we, applied to the New York State to have the cameras in the courtroom. And suddenly a whole bunch of big law firms were like, oh my God, you have an in because there's this precedent. We'll help represent you in court. And we were like, oh my God, why are these big white shoe law firms like coming to help us in this one little tiny case? And it's because they would love to have cameras in the courtroom. Why? Because they just want to have like a television show like Court TV that basically puts all these cases on television. It's like, just roll the camera and, cover it every evening and you're good. So you can understand why they want cameras in the courtroom. There's a lot of forces that want cameras in the courtroom. But at the end of the day, as well as I do, people act in front of cameras. You put up a camera and people are going to act. And so I think it would unfortunately be a perversion of justice if there was a camera in the courtroom.
Yeah, like I said, and this is what you're going to have 2 hours of presses probably at the end of every day about what's going on, because the media is going to be there. They're going to report on this stuff, and then they're going to get answers from the defense and from the prosecution.
I can already hear Nancy Grace in my ear. Yeah.
So listen, you got a fan here. Sherry Wilson says Cropsey was very good.
Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it.
So yeah, I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong with this. I mean, like I said, nothing's a slam dunk, and it kind of worries you because of the fact that we're this close to getting justice for at least 4 of the victims. If you're just joining us now, we're up to 129 people watching this live. We're with writer, director, and producer Josh Zeman of The Killing Season, and also several other documentaries. We're going to get into those later on. And if you remember, please like and share and subscribe to the channel. That helps me out a lot too. But here is a situation now where outside influences that are pretty much, have the TV basically at their beck and call, have created a major problem for this case going through. So I think it's a good time now to bring in the John Ray Symposium, unless you think we need to discuss something else, because I do want to. We want to make sure we talk about the part 2 of the presser that Michael Brown had in regard to the belt, right? So make sure we talk about that.
Yeah, well. So first of all, let's back up a little bit. You and I were going to do some true crime symposium about 2 years ago, right? Before they announced, and we were going to go, and I can't really remember all the details, but you and I were going to go speak on some panel. And my goal to be on the panel was to just keep hammering, Suffolk County. Like, this is not going away. This is not going away.
Right.
And we were told, and everybody got up in arms about it, because I guess it was the symposium was connected to some fiction crime, and that didn't look good. And so we unfortunately they had to shut that down.
Canned.
Yeah.
Canned.
We got fired. We didn't get fired. But
we got fired for a non-paid event.
Yeah, for a non-paid event. So, but then I was very surprised to like see like, oh, and then and it was John Ray who did it. It's okay, you know, he whatever. But then I was very surprised to see he had his own symposium. And I was like, well, you know, you and I can't talk about the case, but he could talk about the case. So there was a real two sides of the kind of coin there that I really didn't appreciate. But what are you going to do?
Unfortunately, we run into these problems in this industry, right? Because it's the fights that come over territory in the true crime world is it's pretty amazing. But I've had John Ray on my show a number of times, and he's been a gentleman. He's been, you know, he's always he's never said no to me. He's, you know, he's comes on there, he tells a thing. However, I haven't spoken to him recently, but the last symposium has now created that reasonable doubt that we were discussing earlier, and I think that's why it's a good segue to get into this. So I got a couple of quick notes, just in case for those that are unaware of what happened or what transpired in that symposium. This came back in January of 2024. He had several new affidavits, right beyond the affidavits from, you know, the motel on the Sunrise Highway, and the, you know, with the taxi cab driver and the lady that was at the house with the Karen Vagata thing. Yeah. This one here, they name the pseudonym Alice Poe. And Alice Poe claims that in 1993, she was only 16 years old and she was a runaway. And I guess the lady in the hotel that was living there, she was living in the hotel in this budget inn in Patchogue, took her to this party with all these men, right? So we could just kind of you know, we're not gonna get into it because YouTube will cancel us, but you can just, you know, speculate what her purpose was for these men.
Yeah.
So she claims that she met Rex Heuermann at this party, and the party was basically thrown by James Burke. And this was in 1993. Now, James Burke was a rookie police officer in Suffolk County. He had just, I think, left the NYPD and switched over to Suffolk. And she said that this man was the life of the party. People had told her at the party that he was a police officer. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we see, we don't know if Alice Poe is her real name, but see her on a witness list coming up for Michael Brown. I mean, this is a serious allegation because this puts both Rex and James Burke at the party together, doing unbelievable, terrible things. And here we go.
So the question is, do you believe it?
I don't know what to believe anymore, right? So, I mean, when you hear, well, listen, we know what Rex has been alleged to be capable of.
Yeah.
And we know what James Burke is just about capable of doing just about anything or anybody.
Like looking at it separately, you know, would Burke do that? Hell yeah, of course. You know, without a doubt. Would Rex do that? Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. The question for me is whether those guys, you know, traveled in the same circles or whether they would have reason to be together in that. And I think that that's, for me, the question of whether or not, like, you know, all the tenets of that story make sense. The question is, are they together? And I would think if they were consorting, right, together, we would find a lot more evidence than somebody who was a minor at the time, 16 years old, would somehow remember from 1993 that these two guys were at this party. So I believe both sides. I just don't know if they're together. But my point being, like, if they were like in cahoots over the course of all these years, like, we would have more evidence of that. We would see more evidence of that. You know, the digital trail of them talking would be, you know, 422 electronic devices.
Right.
Alice also said she was in a room with Burke, Bittrolff, Rex. Okay, you know.
Yeah, Macedonia, and
was Joey Bonfuto there too?
And a player to be named later. But here's the thing, though. Burke was from all intents and purposes, we don't know. We're not going to use certain words, but he was probably worried about outsiders knowing about his thing. Okay. So if he's going to be at a party and there's going to be underage women there, I don't think he was going to allow himself to be in a place where people who would know he was a cop, but he didn't know them. Because talk about an outsider turning his whole life upside down. I think that might have been a sticking point. That's where I kind of because this would have had to show a relationship much sooner than 1993.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't,
You disagree. Listen, that's what this is about. Yeah.
As let's say Alice Paul just said, she was in a room with Burke, Bittrolff, like all the serial killers getting together and hanging out in the same room.
Joel Rifkin. Yep.
Like,
You forgot him.
It's too fantastical. Now that doesn't mean it couldn't be true, and it doesn't mean that Miss Poe believes that that's what she saw. But we also know that eyewitness testimony is very circumspect. Okay, I've spoken at length with Alice Poe, verified her identity, and debunked her entire
claim.
Okay,
I would love to see her on the stand. So that's Raul, and Raul is on top of just about every one of these things.
Absolutely, and Raul has found some unbelievable things throughout his investigation. By the way,
yes.
So like he surprised me. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah.
But will that matter to attorney Michael Brown? No.
Does that matter to attorney John Ray?
I think it would absolutely would matter to him.
No, meaning like, does it matter that the entire story is debunked? Like, you're not going to rescind the affidavit. Like, an affidavit means nothing. It's just somebody saying that I remember this claim, and there are people who want to help and misremember things. 1993, I couldn't tell you, even how old I was in 1993 or where I was or anything like that. Guys, I have no memory whatsoever, especially as a kind of, young partying kid. I don't remember anything. So I really just have a problem with all these affidavits. So I'll tell you a story. A woman named Leanne came to me right after the show was done, and she said that she knew who the serial killer was. She was a alleged sex worker / girlfriend. Like, she didn't, she was a kept woman or something like that. And then she listed out being at all these parties that Burke was at, and that there was a gentleman who was at the party. Burke wasn't the killer, but her boyfriend at the time, she believed, was the killer, and he was at that party. And I didn't know what to do with her. I couldn't confirm her claims. So I said, well, I'm not the right person to speak to, and I said, John Ray, you should call John Ray. He's the lawyer. There's a level of scholarly and legally, thing going on here. And I was under the impression that John Ray was going to like check her claim and do all this kind of research, and then turn around 24 hours later and she's at a press conference.
I remember
her, and I was just like, I get it, because we were all trying to push the case forward and trying to do it, but like, you can't just throw claims out there without backing up the information. You have to really, do the detective work, if you will, to like do that. Like, it doesn't help everybody. And now look down the line, Michael Brown is going to use that information to unfortunately try and get Rex off.
Right. And unfortunately, this was not a problem until last July. And then now it's a problem, right? Nobody discussed it, because I think most people were pretty down on the case and down on the police department as even trying to ever even solve it. So nobody ever really thought about this, because none of this stuff really came out until after the arrest. And all of a sudden now it's everybody is, a conspiracy theorist, and they're trying to make all these ties and everything else that goes along.
Now, it's not all those, it's not necessarily somebody's fault per se. Like, yes, you should do the work and debunk the claims. Like, you can't just put an affidavit out there, whether it helps or not. Like, you really need, that's part of the integrity of all of our responsibility, right, in talking about this case, is to do the research. But a lot of the blame can also be placed at the feet of Suffolk County PD as well, i.e., let's talk about the very infamous fight between Richard Dormer and Spota. And that was a political fight, but it also started over, is it one serial killer or two? Right?
Yep.
Joe, you want to kind of give us the whole breakdown there?
Sure. We had the public fight, or the public feud, between then Police Commissioner Richard Dormer and then District Attorney Thomas Spota, and it was public. And the police commissioner said it was one killer, and Spota said it could be as many as three, and he's the district attorney.
Yeah.
Geez, talk about an unfortunate experience, because we've said it all along that if they ever made an arrest, and we have talked about this years ago before the arrest,
Yeah.
it's going to be a problem.
Right. So it may not matter all the affidavits that come up, that are later debunked and all that stuff. It may not matter, because Michael Brown could just go right to the source and be like, look, it doesn't matter all these weird affidavits of people and coming forward. We could just go right to the police chief and the district attorney having a public battle.
Yep.
Saying, it's one serial killer or two. Just based upon that, technically he could get off in terms of reasonable doubt.
Absolutely.
Why would they have this public battle? Why would they do this? It unfortunately
makes no sense.
The whole case.
It made no sense.
You tell me. You're the cop.
It made no sense. It was the first time I've ever seen a district attorney and the police department argue about how many killers there are
in a serial murder case
that was still young in its infancy in the investigation.
But they knew, either of them knew, a DA would know that if they ever caught the killer, that any defense attorney worth his salt would come back and say, well, look at this public spat. You can't tell me that this was political or anything like that. Like, why would Spota even go there? Doesn't it ruin any case he would later have?
Absolutely. And specifically, he would be the one, if they made the arrest,
right.
He would have been the one trying to explain this all the way. Right.
So my question to you is, what, was the politics against Dormer because Dormer was the Democrat and he was the Republican, or what, the other way around? I don't think, not that political labels mean anything in Suffolk County. It's just about power party and power party, but why would he even do that in the event that they would catch the guy and he would be the guy leading the prosecution?
And this is what helps fuel conspiracy theories too, right? So, I mean, this kind of helps push it. And we're not talking about something that's a secret, folks. This video of that public fight can still be found on YouTube. It's there. And or just go to newsday.com and search for the article there. I think Newsday is all paywall though, but it's out there. It's been documented, and Josh and I have spoken about this a couple of times in regards to this, and we've listen, even from a casual observer's standpoint, you look at that fight and you just say, what were you thinking?
It's bonkers. But I ask you, Joe, what were they thinking? Did they want the case to be did they want to almost throw away the case when we get why would Spota do that? That's my question to you. Why would Spota do that? Was the politics just so strong? Did they never think he was going to catch the guy?
I think Spota was really, I think the establishment, let's put it that way, not just so much Spota, the establishment of Suffolk County was pissed off at Dormer for mentioning the fact that we might even, during a press conference, when he was talking about the case, it says, we might possibly, I think the exact quote was, we might possibly have a serial killer on our hands. And I think that's the exact quote, with missing the little bit of the Irish brogue there.
Yeah, I was going to say, where's your brogue? We might have a serial killer on our hands.
Right. And when I heard that, Josh, I almost fell off the chair, because cops never use I call it the S word, right? You never use serial killer. You'd use words like pattern or, that kind of thing. So when he said that, I was like, holy, and I think that press conference where the police commissioner said those words, I think then the entire media descended upon this thing like a plague. And and I think that's what the anger came out of Spota. And because I think he got a lot of pressure from above saying what is this guy doing, kind of thing.
Which I get, right? Okay. So, and it's very interesting. People don't quite know, but now there's a whole checklist. If there's a possibility that there's a serial murder in your jurisdiction as a police department, you now go through this checklist, right? And you immediately bifurcate a whole media thing for that. There are lessons learned from past serial killer cases where now they have a whole game plan of how to address the case in both the media and from a perspective. Dormer obviously didn't know that. It was kind of early in the game. We've said it before. Not every police department has so many serial murder cases that they have this game plan, although Long Island had Joel Rifkin and had Michael Shumlin. So you would think that they would kind of know, but they didn't know. And Dormer was definitely not the most sophisticated of, police officers. Like when I interviewed him, he's like, Josh, I've been taking a class about this at the community college. I was like, oh, geez, we're in trouble.
Yes, absolutely.
But so he obviously didn't follow that protocol. But then why? I just don't understand. Like, why would Spota not turn around and say, like, we don't know what we have, and you shouldn't have said that, or like, we don't know what we have, but why go like, we could have 3? Like, that's the worst possible thing to say.
Yes, because it also puts the fact that people question, like, but do the police actually know what they're doing at this point? And then I ask, listen, the district attorney only knows like this much of the case. The police department is the one who's supposed to know all about the case. Why are either of you making comments publicly about that? I'll no idea. Listen, I actually had a serial killer case in the Bronx, but it was in the cold case squad, so it wasn't a media thing. However, I remember I don't remember if it was the lieutenant or whatever said, if you ever do, I was always told if there's a presser, you don't say a word, because if you use the word serial killer, you'll be walking a footpost on the Brooklyn Bridge in January, kind of thing, right? I mean, that's basically because of and this was way before social media ever really came about, because we're talking like 2003, 2004, I think it was. But no, there are certain things in policing. I don't care if you're a cop or you're the police commissioner. There's certain things you don't say in public.
I think you also don't say, I don't know if we've got, Jack the Ripper running around here, which I think you did say.
I think you said that too. Right. So, after a while, you kind of shake your head. So if you're just joining us now, we're 42 minutes into this. We have 152 people watching. We have writer, director, and producer of The Killing Season on A&E, Josh Zeman. If you remember, please like and subscribe to the channel as you enter or leave the room. We're discussing Rex Heuermann, Long Island serial killer, and the latest out of the defense attorney, Michael Brown, from last Wednesday. So, you going to say something?
I would just, I'm like, I have our notes, like, okay, we're going to have a podcast, so I go through the case files and I'm just like looking at all like my notes and I have like pages and pages of things to discuss.
Me too.
The lab and discovery reports. Prosecutors said in court they had handed over to the defense 2,500 pages of lab reports, DNA evidence, data from electronic devices linked to Heuermann, as well as police department's lead log containing 2,944 tips, right? And they handed over all the files on the tips. Ray Heuermann had 7 burner phones over a 14-month period and had searched more than 200 times about the Gilgo Beach investigation, right? Visiting here, this is where I'm leading to, the Suffolk County Police website that was created in 2020 is the clearinghouse for information tips. Now, we even speculated back then that they would be looking at people who was visiting the site, right?
Yes.
Hoping to find a serial killer, which is kind of what we were doing in, putting out those like posts on Backpage, hoping that the serial killer would call us. And, we don't know if Rex actually did, but that led to this weird kind of rollout of the website, which I know you guys discussed. Sugar Bear, who, as we all know, right, when they rolled out the website, it depending on how you like went in and put your search bar, you could find like test pages, quote unquote, that they had created, and they put a name on one of the test pages of an individual named Sugar Bear, right? Is that correct?
Yep, Andre Isaacs.
That's correct. And who had been dismembered, and there were many people who believe that whether or not this could be related. So I didn't listen to the podcast where you guys discussed it. So what was your guys' final analysis on Isaac?
Yeah, well, actually, Raul kind of educated me in that case, because he actually introduced me to it. So I had him on last week, and we talked about it, and it is quite interesting because of the fact that not far from Manorville, where the head was found, the dismemberment angle. The only thing that, and of course, it was the Brooklyn, East New York, Brownsville angle too that we talked about.
That's what I wanted to bring up. That's where I'm going with that. But yeah,
okay.
But keep going.
And the fact that the body was scattered all along near waterways, that kind of thing too. So it's kind of shows you that the person has the same sort of MO. And listen, The thing on the Gilgo News website, you and I have talked about that offline years ago, and we said that this was a fishing expedition to see who was coming up, but we never publicly came out and said anything because that would be irresponsible, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it was also a good thing for law enforcement agencies to look at if they have a major case to put out one of these things to see if what they get, what kind of hits they get on it.
Yeah, but the question is like, are they really that good? Like, there's the TV world of what we think the police department could do forensically in the digital world, and then there's like the reality, and it's like, do you think they really can check through and find out who the guy is and cross check that against burner phones? And I just don't know whether they really had the wherewithal to kind of do that, or whether or not, because the guy did the website.
Right. Well, specifically after they, made the arrest, then they had his IP address, and they had all that, and then they can probably go back into the records. I don't know how long those records are kept, but you can search for an IP address once you have your own website. Like, I mean, I have my own website, and I'm not that savvy enough to be able to see who's watching, nor do I care.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's a landing page, right? It's not. I'm not trying to collect information. It's just a landing page.
I just didn't know whether they were really that good enough to kind of like figure that whole thing out. But the one thing about Andre Isaac's case that doesn't make sense is him getting into a vehicle and people seeing him leave in a very kind of like red flashy vehicle and
right.
things like that. I believe that there was somebody killing trans sex workers in Brownsville around that time. And that somehow those they got the idea to dismember the bodies and throw them around Long Island. It just makes sense logically. Waterways, that makes sense. And the dismemberment from a forensic countermeasure. I just think that we're dealing with two different serial murders.
Right. And Raul and I discussed that in the respect that just because he got picked up, that doesn't mean he didn't take him somewhere and he could have met someone else during this party or what have you, right? So that's because the description of that guy who picked him up, I think it was in a red sports car, and he was male Hispanic.
Yeah.
So and that throws off the entire thing, but that doesn't mean he stayed with him, right? He could have just picked him up and say, "Hey, I got this party I want you to come to because we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, and I thought you might be interested."
Yeah.
But that, there could be. Listen, there could be several other people that are involved in this. But I saw when Long Island Press did an article on Andre Isaacs.
Yeah.
And that's why I had asked Raul if he could come on and discuss that, because I really needed to, to get his sense on it. I was able that page still exists on the Gilgo News website, but you can't get it from Gilgo News. You have to. So I took a screenshot and I had the date, the time on it, and showed that I just got that this morning, the day of the show.
Yeah,
it's still there. And they said, "Oh, it's just for training purposes." I'm like, oh boy.
So that was one. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. We could talk about the fact that was Ellerup in town during one of the things. Another thing that came out from the symposium that I noted was that Ray had claimed he spoke to a hotel manager in Atlantic City who told him that Ellerup and the two children, had arrived in Atlantic City later than, but the Atlantic City connection kind of went. I was like, Atlantic City. So does that mean they went to Atlantic City often?
I don't know, but here's the thing, though: the bank records, I think it was a Bank of America, gave a specific time when the charge was done.
Yeah,
I don't remember too many issues of the bank making an error about when something gets swiped.
Yeah,
so that becomes a huge problem.
Yeah,
in regards to into the flip side of that.
Yeah, and again, I just don't understand why certain parties are trying to help create reasonable doubt in this case again. And it's concerning, because in some effort to, I don't know why, like why create more reasonable doubt? If we're going to do the investigation and if we're going to continue to investigate this case, let's continue to investigate who the other victims are, who Asian Male is. Let's find who killed these individuals. That's where we need to be putting our energy, not creating reasonable doubt as to whether this guy who visited a website 200 times, has DNA evidence. Like all those things, should not be in question.
Right, and I'm just waiting now for the conspiracy theorists to come out with the reason why Commissioner Rodney Harrison left is because he was getting too close to the real people who were involved. But tell me I'm wrong, Josh. Right? Tell me that's not what's going to happen.
It's a shame. It's a shame. It's a shame that is going to happen. It's a shame that like the families are going to have to be put through the ringer
again.
All that again, just to hear, rather than concentrating on the other stuff. And there's other families out there. It makes me sad. There's other families out there who need answers to their loved ones.
Peaches and everybody else.
With a child. Like. Let's concentrate. That was always my thing. My thing was like, let's concentrate on finding those other victims, because that could bring a lot of answers, not just important answers for those victims and their families and the justice that they deserve, but answers more about Rex and some of the other things. Now, it's not like whether everybody's, how close they're getting to the real thing. Like, what's the real thing? Like, what's going to be uncovered? That Burke was partying with a whole bunch of high-level Suffolk County PD's officials in parties with drugs and sex workers. There you go.
Yeah, and that's been out there for God knows how long, and even covered in Gus Garcia Roberts' book, right? Jimmy the King. That's like
an amazing book. If you have not read that book, and you are interested in this case, you must, because it puts everything in perspective. But more than that, it shows you like we're not dealing with like super duper geniuses here. We're dealing with guys who like to do coke and bang hookers. Quote unquote. I'm using that like I don't use the word hookers. I'm like using that as part of like the context of their talk.
Right.
Knock around fun. Hey, we're a police chief.
Right.
No, it's not me.
Right, and I was hanging out with Gus Garcia this past weekend.
Yeah.
So it's a book you got to read if you're doing for them. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a group of like cavemen almost, and it's kind of like in that respect. But that rumor has been going on for as long as this case has been allowed, and even beforehand.
Yeah, and no doubt. Obviously, I think we all know. And does it reach the highest levels of? Yeah, it does. But again, are you still surprised there's a bunch of high, powerful dudes hanging out, doing drugs, and having sex with sex workers? Like, no, I'm not surprised. That's what power corrupts. Absolutely, or whatever. But that's not what we should be looking at here. We should be looking at these victims who need justice and who need answers. I sound like a record. I'm sorry.
No, but like Tiffany was, kind of took the words out of my mouth, because we're already talking about people who have already made some terrible decisions already. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility, and there is still one more thing that we have to talk about that press conference, because we're already 53 minutes into this. I mean, I can't believe how fast that went. But if you could stay around for a little bit, if we go into overtime, I hope that's all right. But
I like overtime games.
Okay, you like overtime? Cool. So let's talk about the belt, right? Because that was the second part of the Michael Brown presser, right? When he talked about how Burke, he wants all those files. And he also wants the FBI files on Burke, which we didn't mention earlier, but I think he's got a better chance of seeing God than getting those files. But here's the thing.
Which relates back to the gangs, which I always find anytime you did the whole gang thing. And anytime the gangs come up, it's so interesting to me, only because that's like, how one of the entree points for the FBI to get into this case, or it's the feds to get into this case against Burke, right?
Right. And MS-13, right? So I mean, and then if you'll notice what happened with MS-13 after that, I mean, it was a total disaster. They had, I think, there was a quadruple homicide, there was a couple of double homicides. I mean, it absolutely went off the charts for a couple of years right after that was disbanded. And is he Senator Bob Trotter?
Yeah.
Right, so he was on that.
He's not a senator.
He's not a senator. What is he? A congressman? Legislator? What is he?
Oh, wait. Aren't we talking about Trotta, the former detective who was?
Yes.
Right, Trotta. Oh, he is. I think he now has a political.
He has political. Yeah, politician.
It's like senator or anything like that.
I don't know, but stupid thing. Yeah, he is a politician. We'll have to look it up as a legislator. He's like Raul just said, a legislator. So he's a legislator in Suffolk County. Yeah, and he was on that task force that got disbanded, and he's been an outspoken critic, of course, of a lot of politics in there. He's said some questionable things too. I've been trying to get him on the show.
Well, and just so everybody who doesn't know, right? So one of the issues was there was a big gang-related kind of squad, right? From Suffolk County dealing with the gangs. MS-13. This was 20 years ago, right? And Burke was, like Suffolk County PD was part of that. I think Nassau County PD was part of that. The feds were part of that. Like, it was a big thing. But Entrada was part of that. And apparently, I don't know all the details, and I should read Jimmy the King, but apparently, like, the FBI, Suffolk County didn't want the FBI involved in this gang thing. And it was weird behavior. Like, why was Suffolk County trying to, like, exclude the FBI? This is probably the FBI case. There was talk of wiretaps. And basically, from the story that I heard is like Spota and Burke were like, they were saying, you guys were talking shit about us on the wiretaps. And they're like, how do you know? And he's like, well, we were wiretapping the wiretaps and we heard you guys talking shit about us. And they're like, I'm sorry, you were wiretapping federal agents from the Suffolk County PD. Like, do you have a warrant to do that? So we're talking about illegal wiretapping that then led to this whole, the feds realizing that Burke and Spota are dirty.
Right, and opened the door for that federal investigation too. So if there was any question about it beforehand, they had it with those illegal wiretaps for sure.
Right, and then when Chris, what's his name? I'm sorry,
McPartland.
No, the kid who
Loeb.
Yeah. So when Loeb basically brought this allegation forth that he had been a prisoner, a suspect or a prisoner beaten up by Burke, suddenly the feds swooped in and were like, "Oh my God, we can use this to get Burke because we know he's dirty from everything that he's doing."
Right, and this one is. Sharon says, please, overtime, and sent us that sticker. So we're going to end up in overtime anyway because we have so much still to talk about.
I haven't said this, but I spoke to Loeb at one point, and he called me and he said that, like, when he made this allegation, like, he was pulled into a federal meeting or got a phone call, and they're like, we need you to kind of step up to the plate and get involved into this whole thing. And he's like, oh, okay. He's just a kid who was kind of, drug-addled at the time or something like that. So
yeah, and he's still unfortunately fallen into problems with that. I hear lately. I think he was arrested again not too long ago.
Yeah,
for some of that stuff.
So he was a pawn used by the feds to go after Burke because they knew Burke was dirty from the whole MS-13 thing. Trotta had said he was dirty. Trotta had written letters, right, both anonymous and non-anonymous letters about Burke to superiors, probably to the Fed, saying, like, you got to investigate this guy,
Yep. And before we get into the famous op-ed, I think it was written in the newspaper, right? I mean, that was another thing that was there was unknown author, so to speak. But Maria Torres, thank you very much for that super sticker. And Regina Heath, thank you very much. Thank you for everything. But yeah, there was an article written in the Newsday in regards to the investigation and everything else and the allegations. So it was kind of pretty wacky when it came down. I mean, it's craziness, and then the union getting involved, and oh my God, the list just goes on and on.
You mean the PBA?
Oh yeah, the PBA, Suffolk PBA, and they have a super PAC, right? I mean,
that's what we're talking about here, right? Politics and law enforcement, and thank God we have a law enforcement person with us who can really break it down. Why does Long Island have a super PAC that supports law enforcement?
I think it's the only one, or in the country. I mean, it's very influential too. They have a lot of money, and historically, Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk, that is anyway, because people don't realize that Brooklyn and Queens are part of Long Island. But that's an argument for a whole other day. But Nassau and Suffolk were always Republican strongholds, law and order kind of thing. And it just kind of fit well. But unfortunately, some of the people that have been chosen have not been stellar.
Well, okay. So is it a coincidence that a place that has a law enforcement super PAC has law enforcement police chiefs and district attorneys who have gone to jail? By the way, district attorneys don't go to jail. It usually just does not happen.
I think I couldn't remember another case specifically. I mean, Long Island had an issue with a judge a long time ago that he ended up going to prison, but the district attorney, I can't really think of any.
So you have to ask yourself, this type of behavior, a super PAC, there's none other in the country. It doesn't happen often, but now You got Spota going to jail. Like, there is a correlation there in terms of, like, again, not serial killer behavior, but just general corruption.
Jay just says, thanks for always bringing such great interviews. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, Josh. Yes, thanks, Jay. And Jay has a show later on this afternoon. Jay, just post the link into the show so that everyone knows where to head. The issue that comes out, so let's talk about the belt now, right? So WH, honestly, I kind of thought that the belt thing was a non-issue when it first happened. Then it becomes a big issue when we find out about the bodies that were wrapped with it. And there was also another belt that actually had that tip cut off.
Yep.
So, a mistake made by the killer, so to speak, right? Forget to cut the tip off of that one. And it becomes an integral part of this. But now all of a sudden, WH happens to be the initials of a former police officer, according to Michael Brown, that then District Attorney Tim Sini was investigating and was close to, quote unquote, arresting.
Yeah.
And I went, what? I mean, we knew about Michael Brown had made the allegation that there are other people that were looking. And I said, that's a good thing, right? Because you want to exclude all others. But now I'm hearing that this guy has the same initials. It presents another problem.
So I think you and I both know, and we're probably not talking out of school here, but Tim Sini was going to make an arrest of another individual related to this case. A police officer. It kind of made sense in a lot of ways. Some of the original profiling had been, this is a guy who knows law enforcement. And, Tim Sini's not a stupid guy, like he worked
federal
prosecutor, he worked for Preet, like that's no joke, obviously there's a lot of political pressure to arrest somebody, pressure that I hope we all had provided. Right.
Yep.
But and then so this arrest may have been coming. We heard rumors, and then there was a lot of stuff like, don't arrest him, please, please, please don't arrest him, because there's not enough evidence. Right. So this is now all coming home to roost. Anybody who may have been linked to the case, who looked like a good suspect for a while, Michael Brown is obviously going to say, well, can it be him? Look, Bittrolff will become another wedge in this case, right?
Yes. Hold that thought too, because I want to circle back to Bittrolff, because there's some crazy things that have been happening or happened with his court dates all of a sudden just have completely disappeared. But we're going to get into we'll get into that too if we have a few extra minutes. But yes, here's the thing though: we have DNA that says
right.
It's Rex. It's his daughter's hair. It's his wife's hair. Go back to the evidence. But still, once again, what did people hear? There's another person. The idea of a proper criminal investigation is to exclude all other people. So when I first heard that,
beyond reasonable doubt.
Right, beyond reasonable doubt. And the way you could do that is through DNA or through video surveillance or some other type of direct evidence where you can't say, well, it could be my sister's aunt's uncle's behind, right? I mean, it is what it is. And at the time, they make the right move because probably the DNA wasn't coming back to, or at least close to, this guy, whoever he was.
Yeah. By the way, Michael Brown's argument that like, oh, they had DNA and now they don't have, or they didn't have DNA and now they do have DNA. Like, dude, he knows technology is like on a DNA technology is on a crazy curve, right? Like in terms of how good AI is helping DNA technology. So yeah, you have bad DNA, 10 years, and suddenly you're going to be able to do all the evidence that you couldn't do previously. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. It's like light years. Yeah. I mean, it's the difference between 10 years ago and now is like the difference between the Stone Age and going to the moon.
Well, that's it, right. It's the technology curve, right? You know what I'm saying? Like it used to be here, and now it's like here. Like things are going up just so much. It's going to be ridiculous.
Steel Guitar, thank you today. I'm a proud member of 1 month, loving it. Thank you, Steel. Like having you here too. It's craziness at this point, because every time he's going to bring something up, you can refute it. But here's the other thing that people don't realize is defense attorneys can come out and say anything they want. The prosecutors can't, right? You can't combat this kind of narrative or have your court held in public opinion. You just can't.
Yeah. So we'll see. Another interest. So the belt? Yeah. Sure. Could it be somebody else's belt? Absolutely. But how did the wife's hair get on that somebody else's belt?
Right, and the daughter too. It's not like it's and of course it brings out, well, maybe the wife was involved in it. Yes, you think you tell me the wife and the daughter is helping him carry these bodies into the bushes? I mean, come on, enough of that already. I mean,
so dumb. If you want to look like, why is she saying what she's saying? Because she's being paid $1 million. Because they're telling her, like, look, tell the world that you don't quite know what, provide some mystery, for the end of the show. That's why she's saying she's not 100% sure. But on the other side, there was a really good quote that came out in the Newsday when they were asking about neighbors. Neighbors are like, we were telling her years ago that, like, he was looking at sex, he was like being involved with sex workers. She was in denial, and it's like, this guy is a monster. He's an ogre. Like, he is battering this family, whether physically and or mentally. Now, did she know but didn't want to say anything because she's like an abused wife? That could totally be true. But just being a part of it, I don't know. Just again,
I'm not buying it. And then even if they are, they still need her cooperation. So they're not going to shut her down in any way, because once you become the focus of an investigation, you're never talking to the police again. And she's got a lawyer anyway, so there's probably not talking unless he's there anyway. So it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, but why is the lawyer John Ray's former partner?
Yeah, that's the other little tidbit, right? So John Ray's former partner, is representing the family over there. So yeah, it's all kind of crazy stuff that's happening, and basically, the Macedonios of the world and the Michael Browns have some baggage that they come along with. That doesn't mean that they're not going to do a good job, but this is what they're doing. I mean, it's this is Suffolk County politics all wrapped up in one bit. Everybody knows each other. Everybody's involved in something. Everybody's got a checkered past, so to speak. Well, not everybody. Most people have a checkered past, and the game keeps on being played.
Yeah, right. So, and this to quote Ves Mitev, who I think I met him one time. Like, I think it was Shannon Gilbert's funeral, which was the craziest thing. So sad. But we're there, we're covering the funeral, and it's, I think it was, I wouldn't have brought a camera to a funeral, never in a million years. But John Ray said he's gonna have a press conference at a funeral, and I was like, what? Like this is nuts. Like, like, talk about taste, right? So, and there he's like yelling into the camera, like, you murderer, we're gonna catch you. And I remember he was dressed up in a kind of, dandy outfit, and Ves was there kind of dressed up in a dandy outfit, and it's just the weirdest thing, It was just rough. It was
years ago I visited Shannon's grave twice. Once was way back when, and she just had a small little plaque with her name typed on it. It took years before a stone was put in place. I mean, years and years. I mean, I'm not kidding. And I had the photographic evidence to prove my point, because I've taken 2 different photos at 2 different times in during the course of the years. And it was kind of like almost as if she was just like forgotten about, kind of thing. It was like, okay, let's move on. But yeah, we're going to keep on carrying this banner. But, nobody wanted to give her a proper headstone. I think finally there was a group that even got together and did like a GoFundMe, I think it was, that actually helped put the marker in place, and she's buried in Amityville.
Yeah, I remember going there. But this weird like battle in the press between Ray and Ves, former partners, now on separate sides, and I think Ray's making allegations against the mother, and then the lawyer speaking out saying Ray's just trying to get into the press, and it's unsubstantiated. Like, it's crazy distraction from the important points of the case.
Yeah, and I actually give Ray Tierney some credit for not getting into this rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
Listen, there are many people that don't like Ray Tierney for whatever reasons, because his brother-in-law was attached to James Burke, which is it's just another kind of thing, right? Because Ray Tierney's brother-in-law was one of the palace guards for James Burke. So people bring that up and like, oh, they're all on the same team. I'm like, come on. Ray Tierney has he's a professional, and you know the Palace Guard turned state's evidence, and I'm sure he was kind of helped along. And this is all covered in Jimmy the King.
Jimmy the
I mean,
King.
this isn't like something new, right? It's been out there for a long time. But for those of you that really are interested in getting involved in this case, you got to read that book because it gives you the background on and all. It's ironic because all the players that we're talking about now that were named in this book before they even became players in this case. That's the interesting part.
It helped me understand how systemic it is, and it's not like part of some grand conspiracy of like serial murder. It's like, oh, I understand that like these are just corrupt dudes who have been doing it for like 30 years, and this is just like a kind of the worst outcome of bad politics and corruption and things like that.
Exactly. So you have a few more minutes. We can just get into Bittrolff a little bit quick. Okay.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, we have to, right? Because this is now, because Josh, mark my words, and you and I have discussed this outline. This will be another part of the Michael Brown playbook. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's just as simple as that. So, do you want to just give the audience just a quick overview of John Bittrolff for those that might not know who he is?
Okay, so basically, Bittrolff was a construction worker / contractor who was arrested for killing two individuals, correct?
Colleen McNamee and Rita Tangretti.
They had been sex workers, TBD, yes, and they had been assaulted and left near the highways, basically exit ramps, in Suffolk County and Nassau County. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? And
I think it was like Copeg. It was close to the border.
And he had been looked at as a suspect in the Gilgo Beach murders because of Manorville, because of tragically Jessica Taylor's. Some of her remains were found in Manorville, as well as
Valerie Mack.
Thank you. Also found in Manorville, and here you have a guy from Manorville who was arrested for killing sex workers in the 90s, and this was part of the original kind of like going through and testing DNA, and so they found a guy, but he hadn't been linked to any of the Manorville or Gilgo Beach victims, but he had been linked to two other victims, correct?
Yes, one of them was here, Michelina, Sandra Castillo, and that was the third one, which would have made him, quote unquote, the definition of a serial killer, but because they weren't able to tie that one into him, he was only seen as a double murderer.
That's correct.
But we can speculate that there are others in his.
Now, the MO is different, right? That was
much different.
The MO was much different. And you could say like, well, serial killers change their MO. Right. I get that. But the point being is if you're looking at the times of the murders, like it's two different MOs, like within like a very short span, meaning like when Asian Male was dumped or when Peaches were dumped. Like if you were changing your MO, like if they say Rex Heuermann is changing his MO from some of the originals, like from dismemberment to non-dismemberment, that's like a long progression. But here you're talking about like within like a year. And so it didn't make sense. They didn't think that Bittrolff was connected. And we had originally thought that they were trying all these kind of ways to link Bittrolff to Lisk because it would have helped take the pressure off. But there are links that need to be that we don't understand, like we've got Manorville victims and Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack were found in Manorville, and Bittrolff lived like a block, like half mile away from Manorville, from where they were found. So it just doesn't make sense. Is he involved? Is he not involved? We can't tell. The MOs are different, but he lives so close to two of the victims, and so he's in jail. But I think the big thing for me was when he was convicted, right? Convicted. Yes, he was convicted. I'm sorry. It's just been so long. He was convicted.
Yeah, he was convicted. 2017, I think it was.
Yeah. The ADA, Bacavalia, I think it was, had said, we believe he might be connected to some of the Gilgo cases. And I thought that they were just trying to say that because they were trying to like basically, put the blame on. But now I don't know. Like, is he related? And if so, how does that jive? Like, was Bittrolff and Heuermann together? Like, doesn't really make sense, but maybe it does. Architect.
He was a carpenter or something. Yeah. I mean, but here's the thing, right? So his a few months ago, his defense team has filed a 440 motion in New York State, which is a motion to dismiss. Now, that was the thing when I think I sent you the message. I'm like, or you sent me the message. I don't remember what it was. Like, what the hell is going on now? Yeah. Because when I started, I went back and started looking at it, and there was articles that said that there was a mixture of DNA found with one of the victims. I think it might have been Colleen McNamee. And Spota had basically gotten his conviction and basically said that, we got our guy kind of thing. But the mixture of DNA, the problem that you're having in a case like this is you don't know who deposited the DNA and when they deposited, in what order it was deposited in. And that's part of the problem. So the defense then came out with another statement saying that they didn't get full disclosure of all the evidence, right? So now they're bringing up the Brady material rule. And boy, so he's getting these court dates, and then each one's being adjourned before he shows up. And now he has disappeared from the docket. You can't even find his name in it.
So why?
That's the question, right? Why is that happening now? I mean, if you're the defense and you're trying to get your client out of jail, you just don't drop something like that. Or you drop this nuclear bomb, and then all of a sudden you go away.
Unless, of course, they are talking to him behind the scenes about something else, i.e., he will be charged with another murder, right? Basically, trying to connect him to Gilgo, right? Because we had heard, correct me if I'm wrong, we had heard rumors that he was going to be charged with another murder of one of the Gilgo victims, where they were going to try and pin it on him, and so that's my question. Like, are they bringing up evidence? Do they have evidence to suggest that he might be responsible for one of the other victims? It's a different MO, but that doesn't, maybe we're all wrong about that. And if that's the case, then there are two serial killers. And then was he and Rex working in cahoots? I mean, who the hell knows?
Right. Well, the same situation now occurs for Bittrolff, because there was actually one of the Google searches that Rex was doing too. He was researching John Bittrolff, right? There's another little interesting tidbit, right. But also dating back to the Burke situation and the Rex connection that was brought out.
Yeah.
They have so much digital evidence and forensic evidence in regards to the digital thing, whether it's electronic evidence, meaning cell phone records, internet records, those kind of things, emails. They might be able to prove or disprove that these guys knew each other way back when, because if they have all these old phones, that information is probably still on a SIM card somewhere, and you don't have to worry about getting it from, AT&T or Verizon or whatever, because it's right there in the phone.
Right, because he kept the phones, because he didn't want to
keep the phones.
Right, which is like, I think now we see all the TV shows, the guys are like burning the phones, or like they're drilling the hard drives. Like, that's right. What we need to do.
Smashing. Wow, Sarcasm for Fun just donated 20 memberships.
Jeez.
Wow, Sarcasm for Fun. Thank you so much, and welcome to all the new members. Remember to check out all your members perks, including all of the quizzes and everything else that comes along with it. Thank you, Sarcasm. That was extremely generous of you.
And the question is going to be, what are we wrong about? Like, we talk a lot of, I believe this and I believe that, and at the end of the day, we might be fully surprised and find out that Rex, would you be surprised if Rex and Bittrolff knew each other from certain circles? And no,
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he and Burke knew each other either. I mean, if you told me there was a pink elephant in the lobby right now, I'd be like, okay, let's go see it.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. In this case, people are like, well, you had one opinion, you changed it. It's like, yeah, it's like a game of whack-a-mole and trying to like figure out like what's right and what's wrong, and the connections, and at this point, I don't even know. It's difficult to make allegations, and the other thing that comes up is like, do people know each other, right? Do they know each other, and do they like just because they have certain interests, would they have crossed paths versus like, are they like group killers together? Like, I think there's a difference there,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And listen, we're spitballing. I mean, it's just in that respect, we know an awful lot about the case. and we know all about the players who were involved, and it's the same damn names that keep on coming up. No, for years. I mean, it's just one after another. And I'm trying to get Legislator Trotter on the show because I want to hear his specific takes on certain things, especially now since the story has gotten really muddied up. And says, "You're welcome, Joe, and thanks, you all. Please make sure to like and share." Thank you, Sarcasm. That is extremely nice of you.
Trotter, remember, Trotter was the one who talked about that when he met Burke, like one of Burke's first days, where they were working together, and Burke went up and said, "Hey, I can get a snuff film," type of thing. And that snuff film story has kind of like, I was told that story 10 years ago, it was like brought up and over, and that becomes Burke is a serial killer because he's interested in snuff films. I don't know if,
nobody's ever really come up with one, right? And says, here's a real snuff film. But
so this is Kenneth Lanning, FBI director Kenneth Lanning, not director, but FBI agent Kenneth Lanning is like really into this whole thing. Like technically nobody has ever come up with a snuff film, i.e. somebody has been killed on camera for the purpose of then selling that video for watching somebody killed on camera. People have been killed on camera before, of course. But whether it's like it has to do with like the transactional nature of it. But I don't know, Vernon Gerberth has quite a lot of videos that I accidentally saw, and they're unbelievably disturbing, so friggin' sad. And so, but like technically it's not like being paid,
Right. I mean, listen, just go to Twitter. I mean, there's videos of people getting shot all day long and murdered. I mean, even they have a video of the guy letting himself on fire yesterday in Manhattan. So it's not like it's, that you can't find this stuff. And I also think when people put on the screen, it says, not, for the mature audience, disturbing content, I think that even increases the views. I mean, that's quite frankly the way it goes. So as we have gone an hour and 20 minutes, Josh, is there anything that we didn't cover today in regards to what we were planning on talking about? Because there's actually probably a couple things we were planning on talking about and didn't get to it. But
yeah, I mean, we were going to, we were going to talk about the swinger of it all. We were going to talk about, have there been any updates with the detectives who were added to the list? And in terms of the investigations, I think we had said that, we're going to hear about Peaches, but we still.
I'm still shocked about that.
Has all of the progress been put towards bolstering the case against Rex?
I think so.
Yeah, right. So basically, I mean, a police investigation more than I do. Like is in some ways finding out information about some of the other victims is hurtful, right? Because who knows what you're going to find? Are you going to find that it was somebody else and people are dumping bodies in the same grounds? And if it is somebody else, then that hurts your case, right?
Yeah, big time. Yeah. So I think that, and I think the District Attorney Ray Tierney has kind of alluded to the fact that, and I think he's kind of said like, well, we have the 4 right now. We're going to basically they got the 4. They want to bring it over the finish line before they open up any more Pandora's box.
Yes, yes, and unfortunately, this was our fear, which we said right early, which is it's all going to come down to the 4. Yes, and absolutely, these 4 women deserve justice. Their families need closure, if you can even say that word. All of this stuff, but here's where the politics of cases, and the politics of winning and the politics of convictions in a county that has a super PAC for its law enforcement come into play,
Yep. It's an absolute amazing story. I mean, I said I was hanging out with Gus Garcia over the weekend. He's like, are you writing part 2? And he said he wasn't, but he goes, all of a sudden he's back and he's intrigued, and of course, how it goes with the authors. They can't really talk about the topics they want to do because someone will beat them to the punch. But this is made for another book by Gus for sure, because he already knows all the background requisite knowledge. And some of these people that he interviewed are no longer around, like Loretta Rickenbacker and Dormer. Yeah, she passed away.
Really?
She passed away. Yep, she passed away. I think it was February or March.
Wow.
Yep. So I asked him about that, and he said, I have all kinds of interviews still with her that never made the book. So because there's all kinds of allegations with her and Burke and kids and everything else that goes along with that. So
Burke's
yeah, Raul said it was December she passed away.
Wow. Burke's legitimate children.
That's been a rumor, an allegation for a long time. Listen, we know that this guy's totally out of his mind, but it's going to be interesting to see how his lawyers handle this wave that's coming at him now.
Is he going to get called to the stand?
I think they could, right? I mean, they could treat him as a what do they call it when what do they call it when the guy doesn't want to?
Hostile witness.
Hostile witness, yeah. I mean, technically, because he could actually implicate himself, right? So it was a good opportunity for him to plead the fifth. So I don't know.
So if he pleads the fifth a lot, then that introduces doubt as to whether, like you could basically say, like, did you attend sex parties? With were any of these 4 individuals at any one of those parties? And he would plead the fifth, and then that would introduce doubt enough to say, well, who knows what happened at that party.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't see his lawyer allowing him to say a damn word. Yeah. But so Flynn Brown says, an afternoon well spent. Thank you, Joe and Josh, and all here. So Josh, we're gonna have to do this again, because next month he has another appointment, June 18th, and then we wait for the fireworks afterwards.
Yeah,
and maybe so maybe we'll get together with Adrian and we'll pick a date. So we'll figure it out. Listen, I want to thank you for your time today. We went almost an hour and a half. Wow, that went by pretty quick. So thank you very much, Josh. Everybody, thank you for all the donors and the mods today. You guys did a great job. I really appreciate that. Josh, you hang out. We're going to end the stream. You guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you tomorrow, 2 p.m. with Cheryl McCollum talking about the Brian Kohlberger case. Have a good day, everybody.